Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Overheard Online. I am your host, Erin. And before we dive in, I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you. The response over the past week has been so overwhelming. The comments, the shares, the new followers. It honestly has absolutely blown me away. I am so grateful for so many of you who have been tuning in and helping me create this community and helping this community grow. It still absolutely shocks me that so many of you want to be a part of this and are enjoying this and are engaging with this, and that you are listening to this still very new and very unrefined podcast. So thank you times a million. Now, on to the elephant in the room. As I'm sure you have already picked up on or already noticed, things sound and look a little bit different today. After I uploaded the last episode, I did end up getting the flu and was unable to leave bed for a few days. And then, unfortunately, after I finally felt better, I managed to develop a cough from being sick with the flu, and that lasted for a bit. And then I ended up losing my voice from having such a bad cough. So all of that to say, it has been absolutely impossible to schedule a time to record with a friend over the last couple of weeks. We kept having to push it back because I just was not able to sit down for 2 hours and speak in a way that would have been enjoyable for anyone listening. But I guess the universe conspired to force me to do a solo episode. It was something I was considering trying out anyways. It would be alongside the co-host format. Part of me testing this out is for me to have a way to be consistent with uploads. This podcast is still extremely new. I don't have episodes with my friends saved in the vault. And so if something like this comes up where somebody is sick who is scheduled, or I'm sick, then unfortunately it makes it impossible to schedule, and having these solo episodes mixed in will just give me a way to not leave you guys hanging, which ultimately I definitely don't want to do. And part of doing this today and this framework is also to experiment with it. Do you guys prefer that I add some of these in more intentionally or just as a filler when something comes up? Do you want a mix of both? With these solo episodes, we can play with the framework. I am open to suggestions. If you like hearing the concepts, the scientific concepts, let me know and we can work some more of those in. If you prefer to keep it to the storytelling, we can do that. There is so much that we can do with them, and I am open to suggestions. Another option, if there's interest that I can introduce in lieu of this or in addition to having the solo episodes, is we can have a once a week live session where I set it up as a story reading time where you guys can tune in live and you guys can be the guests that I interact with. I can record those videos and save them and upload them as well for people to watch whenever they have the chance as additional content. But this is a first run on the whole solo thing. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. And if not, we don't have to do them. So just let me know. And if you want to leave a comment giving me your opinion, great. If you want to directly message me, also totally fine. Happy to take whatever feedback. And so moving on to what I prepped for today. Today is going to be a big episode. We're looking at stories where people map out the universe, different dimensions, talk about different interdimensional beings. And for the first time ever, which is not that long because we only have a few episodes out, we will be digging into some alien encounters. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Our first story was posted 6 years ago in r/retconned. It's titled, "I've Died, Seen the Afterlife, and Can Maybe Explain the Mandela Effect." OP writes, "I only recently discovered the Mandela Effect, and it really resonated with me. The reason is, Ever since I died and had an out-of-body experience years ago, I've been dealing with similar personal examples. Here's what I saw. Reality, as it was shown to me, is fractal. There are infinite versions of every waking moment you're alive, each one representing every choice you could possibly make, and the ripple effect of those choices. They all exist simultaneously. I saw how dimensions contain these variations. The third dimension is our normal vantage point. In the fourth, time becomes a space you can actually move in. I saw it as a long cylinder or a loaf. The space in the third dimension exists within the loaf, memories and the present moment. The future was there too, but it hadn't collapsed yet. From this perspective, the loaf can be seen from every angle all at once. The fifth dimension is a space your time loaf moves in. It includes all possible timelines that result from the different choices you make, creating other loaves. The sixth dimension creates timelines that are completely separate from yours, where other choices were made and intersect with one another. This creates a loaf matrix. Events that unfold in one loaf are actually represented in another. Other beings exist here, in between the loaves. They manipulate them for fun, I guess. In the seventh dimension, the loaves are interacting with one another to make up a fractal sphere. It contains every possible variation at all times throughout existence, and it grows outward like a water balloon being filled. I couldn't see beyond the skin of that balloon, but I assume that's the eighth dimension. And if that were true, then other spheres would exist out there too, each one with their own different center starting point. That would mean different Big Bang variants, different physical laws, and so on. The ninth dimension would then be all those variants existing at a single point. The 10th, that's something beyond my comprehension. I didn't see it, so that's just my theory. So circling back, what's the Mandela Effect? Well, all reality pathways intersect. They have to. That's literally what reality is made of. The effects of other realities shaping our third dimensional experience, and vice versa. When something changes from our past, it means we're on a different track, a different loaf. As far as I can tell, that can only happen in a few ways. 1, we're evolving out of our third dimension. 2, something happened in another loaf and we got switched over. I don't know what would cause that. Death doesn't do it, you just get fed back in usually. But maybe a mass extinction event could, since that might overload the system. 3rd, a higher being is manipulating the loaves. They do that, I watch them do it, but they only do it in the present. And even if they change something in the past, we wouldn't remember, because we'd automatically be placed in a new loaf. I still don't fully understand it, but that's my theory. When I first read this story, it reminded me of a theory that I came across the other night while I was listening to The Sleepless Scientist on YouTube. The theory I'm thinking about is called eternal inflation theory. So the reason why this theory came to mind is that in that video that I'm referring to, the video used the metaphor of bread dough to explain eternal inflation theory. So we'll start there with that metaphor. When dough rises, little air bubbles form all over the dough. Each one of those bubbles is then sealed off from the others. If you existed or lived in one of those tiny bubbles inside of the dough, you would think that that whole bubble was the whole universe. You never realize that just a millimeter away outside of your air bubble, another air bubble exists, and that air bubble is completely separate and unreachable from the one that you exist in. That's basically the overview of how eternal inflation works. So imagine that space itself is dough that never stops rising. Inside that dough, or inside of the space, there are little sparks that are constantly popping in and out of existence. Scientists call these quantum fluctuations, and these have already been shown to exist. Usually, they're tiny and disappear as quickly as they pop into existence. But sometimes, if there are the right conditions, one of these sparks swells up into an air pocket in space or in the bread, and that swelling becomes a mini bubble universe. Our universe, the one that we live in, some physicists believe, is one of those bubbles in space. Our Big Bang is a spark or one of those quantum fluctuations that caused a particular bubble that we then exist in. Meanwhile, if you zoom out at the same time, other bubbles are forming all around the space that is within this cosmic dough, or, within the space that our universe formed in. Some might be bigger, some might be smaller, or governed by completely different rules. Maybe gravity works differently, maybe atoms never form there. Each bubble, though, is its own self-contained universe that exists next to ours or somewhere else in space. Now we're going to take a step back and talk about the fractals and how they fit onto this idea and, tie it all together. So a fractal is basically, for those of you who don't know, just a pattern that repeats itself over and over again within the pattern. So no matter how much you zoom in or out, you can see the pattern constantly reforming. There are two examples that are typically used when describing a fractal or, when trying to imagine one that exists in nature. So one example would be a tree. If you zoom into the tree, you'll find branches that look like mini trees. You zoom into those, you find twigs that look like mini trees. And then if you zoom into those, you just continue zooming in and you constantly see the same pattern continuing to exist. The same thing is true of snowflakes. When you look at the snowflake as a whole, it's a pattern, but the more you zoom in, the pattern just repeats itself. And the snowflake itself is made up of mini snowflakes. So eternal inflation, this theory, itself feels like it's a theory that's fractal because it works the same at every single level. So if you zoom in inside of every universe self-contained bubble, space is fizzing and there are still tiny sparks and these quantum fluctuations popping in and out of existence. Just like with the outside universe, if the conditions are right, one could inflate into its own baby bubble, and it would be sealed off from the universe that it encloses, and it would be expanding separately because it would be expanding within the bubble that it's expanding in. And we'd never notice because we would just be expanding at a rate that was too fast to even notice this little tiny bubble expanding alongside us. And if you zoom out, our bubble universe might just be a spark inside of an even bigger bubble. So we would be one of those bubbles within an even bigger loaf. From our point of view, we're the whole show. We don't realize that we are one of these sparks that turn into a universe within another bubble universe. And what we also don't realize is that our bubble universe has many bubble universes that are constantly popping into existence within ours. So basically, it's bubbles inside of bubbles, and that brings us to how OP described the story. Loaves inside of loaves and fractals, all the way up and all the way down. When I was trying to wrap my head around this and to understand it, I was having difficulty syncing this with many worlds theory. And for those who don't know, many worlds is the idea in quantum mechanics that the universe branches whenever quantum things interact. So at first, I couldn't see how it fit with eternal inflation. If everything is fractal, patterns inside of patterns, I couldn't figure out where the branching would happen. But when I thought about it a bit more, and this is not scientific, I did not read this somewhere, I could be totally wrong, so please do not quote me on this, but it is an idea. When I thought about this, I thought maybe the relationship between universes could be compared to or maybe resembles somewhat a relationship between siblings. And before you think I'm insane, hear me out. So we have identical twins, fraternal twins, and other siblings, right? Identical twins would maybe represent many worlds where one fertilized egg would split into two. It has the same start or same past up until a certain point, and then two universes forming separately within the same loaf or within the same enclosed universe. Those would be fraternal twins. Two bubbles in eternal inflation forming within the same larger universe, separate origins, separate DNA, but both forming side by side in the same womb. And then other siblings are completely separate universes, forming in different times, in different places, and far away. And then, so on and so forth, because patterns repeat themselves. Again, I want to clarify, I am no expert, so do not quote me on this. To some extent, some of these are my own metaphors, and they could be way off. But when I did hear that story, I thought it was so closely related to this idea I had heard once that I had to dig into it. And I just had to share it with all of you. If anyone knows more about eternal inflation and quantum fluctuations and they want to chime in and let me know if maybe it maps on or maybe it doesn't, I am so interested to hear. So please share in the comments. So now, circling back to OP's story with the bread and the bubbles and the different dimensions, we are going to dive into some of the comments and see what people had to say and what OP had to reply to get a better understanding of his story. So one commenter writes, "It's cool how your experience coincides with imagining 10 dimensions. Are your descriptions and interpretation based on our 3D reality? Did you use senses beyond sight in order to perceive them? Also, were you only seeing your own loaves or everyone's together? When you said something happens to our loaf and we get switched over, are you talking about our 3D consciousness? And finally, can we exist outside of the loaves in the 7th dimension or wherever you were perceiving this?" OP responds, "I only saw my loaf in the 4th dimension. In the 5th, I could see every variation of my life. In the 6th, I saw all the loaves and how they intersected. There seems to be a communal path, like a grouping of veins, where a collective reality is then created. Picture smaller spheres within a larger sphere, and between those spheres is where the entities live. So, the idea would be that the Mandela Effect would be the result of our spheres intercepting with another, though I didn't see an example of that." Little side note, interestingly enough, in this comment, OP does describe spheres within spheres or bubbles within bubbles, which totally maps on to the cosmic inflation theory we just discussed. Our next commenter asks, "In the 6th dimension, what are the beings like that manipulate the loaves? Are they more or less evolved than humans?" OP responds to this saying, "They appear above us, some are nice or at least neutral, and sometimes even helpful. They're kind of like keepers. They're usually really busy and uninterested, but if they speak, they'll tell you that humans are actually higher than them and that the other entities are jealous of that. The smaller ones are gaseous, trickster-like, and jealous. They like scaring you. They will show you a version of reality that will completely mess you up and trap you in cycles of negative belief. You're in hell, your life is meaningless, nothing is real. I got caught in one once, it caused PTSD. The themes the smaller ones usually spread is, you're trapped, you're in hell, everything you've ever known is a big lie meant to deceive you. Nobody is real, your whole existence is a lie that is meaningless, and I will prove it to you. My advice? Don't talk to the bad ones, remember you're above them, and you have power over them. So I think that they're just jealous of us." Someone else asks, "What did you mean when you said that when we die, we get fed back in?" OP answered, "Most people get pulled back into the center and recycled out into another loaf. It isn't automatic though, it depends on them." Another commenter speaks about their own experience, adding, "I had a dream after months of incredible painful migraines. I was sucked out of time and saw my whole life within a long tube, almost like a strand of spaghetti, wrapped around and intertwined with other strands of spaghetti but never touching. I felt I could choose where to re-enter and chose a moment in my past. Then I remembered that I have a son that I love, and if I chose that moment in the past, he would never be born. Almost immediately, I was pulled back into the spaghetti and the whole world, reality, whatever you call it, kind of uninverted and folded out on itself. I woke up confused and unsure of what I had just experienced. Your story sounds eerily similar." OP responded to this comment saying, "Yes, your spaghetti strand is my loaf. From far away, it looks like a strand, depending on how old you are, I guess. I called it a loaf because it was thick, and I sliced into it like bread to view different moments of my life, which became slices. A lot of people have seen the same imagery that we're describing." So in the comments, people did ask to see drawings of what OP saw. OP did say that a lot of DMT images do closely resemble some of the images that he saw. And he did link a bunch of photos to the story, which I will link in the description for anyone who is interested. And I will also, as an add-on, link a really realistic, allegedly realistic DMT trip simulation for anyone who is interested in seeing what that is like, to see if they can see how that would map on to OP's experience. And so moving on a bit, but not quite, in OP's post, he does say that he had an NDE experience, and he did link to his original post from several years before that, which was a post on r/ask Reddit. It was a comment posted 11 years ago in response to the question, Redditors who have been clinically dead and then revised or resuscitated, what did dying feel like? Did you see anything while you were passed on? So OP did comment, and we get some more information, so I will read that now to give more color. OP writes, I don't want to get into the details of what led up to it. It was extremely traumatic, but I'll describe the experience from the point of view of when I died. Have you ever been so absorbed in a TV show or a movie that you forget you're sitting there watching it? Then a commercial comes on and suddenly you're snapped back like, oh yeah, I was watching a show. That's what dying felt like to me at the time. My life was suddenly revealed to me as just a silly show that I'd been focused on, a distraction from what was really happening. That was the most frightening part. It felt familiar, and I wasn't religious. At best, I was agnostic. Honestly, a better description would be I never effing thought about it. But after this, everything changed. It was such a paradigm shift that I came back with something close to PTSD. I didn't talk to anyone for about a week, trying to figure out what I had just experienced, how I should understand life after what I had just seen. Here's the gist of what I saw. I fell out of the third dimension into something else. Another dimension it's hard to explain. I could still see the last images of my life, the people around me, their terrified faces, but I could see everything from all angles and across time. I saw infinite versions of the same scene with small differences. People looked a little different, objects were slightly altered, all of it arranged together like a moving fractal. Time was solid. I could look into my past and see obscure events from childhood, little moments I'd forgotten but instantly recognized. My life experiences, all the choices I'd made, formed into an object. To me, it looked like a loaf of bread, but it wasn't really a loaf. That is just the closest way my mind could interpret it. There was also communication, like a voice in my head. When I wondered why my life looked like a loaf, the message I got was, all realities exist at the same time. Random objects in one world, like a carton of milk in a grocery store, could be pieces of entities or even experiences in another time or dimension. An experience in the third dimension could actually be a manifestation of a higher dimensional being. Then there were these entities. Between the fractal bands of realities were rainbow-like seams, and in between those seams were black voids. When I focused on those spaces, I saw entities. They noticed me, more curious than concerned, like, oh, what is he doing here? That's weird, whatever. But as I freaked out, the realities around me twisted with my fear. Terrifying visions appeared, demon faces biting me. The entities casually told me, you will manifest whatever you're feeling. Eventually, I wanted to go back. I tried to find the reality I'd fallen out of, but I couldn't be sure which one that was. I chose the one where I recognized a close friend of mine, looking at me sadly. I moved towards it and suddenly, no transition, it was black. It was like stepping into a 2D image of my last moment before death, and then it wrapped around me. When I woke up alive, back in my body, seeing through my eyes again, it took me about 5 minutes to even understand if I was really alive or if I was just beginning to live in the afterlife. I know it all sounds bonkers. Maybe it's just the chemicals firing off in my brain. I don't know, but I think about it every single day, and one thing is for sure, I no longer fear death. So on this older post, there are comments underneath OP's story, and we get a couple more details, so we'll dig into some of those. One commenter writes, the random obscures memories you described, I've heard that before from a close friend who nearly died. People always say your life flashes before your eyes, but he said it wasn't like that. It wasn't important events, it was just random flashes, like riding his bike as a kid, checking the mail, even eating ice cream. Just little things that he had never thought about. OP responded to that comment. Yeah, that's exactly it. Unimportant events you don't consciously remember. I saw myself as a baby standing on stairs looking at a white cat. Later, I asked my mom and she confirmed it. When I was 14 months old, we lived in a house where somebody had that cat. What really freaked her out was when I drew the house layout, because I could see it from every angle in my memory. She said I got it exactly right, down to the furniture placement and window positions. Another commenter wanted to know more information about the black areas. They write, "This is going to sound strange, but I've been through those black areas. To me, they were tunnels, leading to other places that couldn't really be seen or absorbed." OP responded to that saying, Yeah, I felt the same thing. Like those spaces were between higher dimensions, leading into other fractals, but my mind couldn't interpret what that meant. A different commenter added to this thread of comments saying, "I've only experienced this during astral projection with my meditation teacher. I thought the tunnels were death tunnels, but he told me not to enter them. There were entities walking around, not paying me much attention. Afterwards, I started having hauntings at home. I even had to go get a clearing. For a while, I became briefly telekinetic. I'd leave my body holding a glass, and when I came back, the glass would shatter in my hand. Sometimes the pipes in my house would shake and wail when I re-entered. It scared me so badly that I stopped exploring these ideas altogether." In a new comment thread, somebody else writes, "The way you described falling into that familiar place, I felt something similar when I passed out from inhaling too much laughing gas. My life paused at a random frame, almost like a video game I'd been playing for too long. I turned away from the screen of my life and found myself floating in space, with blurry blue entities all around me. They didn't have faces or limbs, but I knew that they were alive, and I knew that they were friendly. They welcomed me back home, like this is where I existed before becoming human. It was peaceful, like coming home after a long trip. Coming back, though, that was awful. My body felt like a cramped hazmat suit. Skin, organs, dry mouth, sluggish, and noisy. It passed quickly, but it stuck with me. Death doesn't scare me anymore. If that's what it's like, there's nothing to fear." OP responded to this comment saying, "Yes, that's exactly it. Did you also feel that weird shock of going back into being human? I remember thinking, seriously, I have to be this gangly monkey man again? What the F?" It felt familiar, like, oh right, I've done this before. I've been a human so many times, I just forgot about it. And then there's the whole thing where your knowledge just slips away as you return because your brain just can't hold all of it. So the original commenter in this thread responds, "Exactly, I thought, I'm back in this two-armed, two-legged body. Fair enough, at least I'm not a dog. Crazy that so many of us have felt the same thing." Someone else asked OP, "Did you fall into a black hole?" And OP responded, "It felt like being sucked out of reality through the back of my head. The more I resisted, the more aggressive it became. Maybe black holes do that. Maybe their gravity is strong enough to pull the soul out of the body. I don't know. The black areas with the entities definitely felt like that. Incomprehensible space, dimensionless, but still there. And yeah, I know you're referring to Interstellar. A friend made me watch that scene. He's a physicist and wanted my take when I saw it. It gave me a panic attack. It looked visually similar, but in the movie, the character only saw his own timeline. I saw all of them. Close, but not the same perspective." Another commenter asks OP, "If you had chosen a different 2D image when returning, maybe from the past, would you have gone to that moment? Could that be time travel?" OP responded to this question saying, "The past wasn't accessible. Imagine a growing circle. The edge is where the current reality exists. I could view the past, but I couldn't alter it. I could see how changes in the past would ripple into the future, but it wasn't clear or readable, just a mess of fractals. The fear was that if I picked the wrong return point, I'd end up in a reality where the past was different than the one I came from." And our final comment on this story, someone asks OP, "Do you think the demons you saw were your brain manifesting them, or were they outside your will? Did they stay after you came back?" OP responded, saying, "I think it was my will, because the faces felt custom designed to frighten me specifically. They lingered briefly after I returned. I remember looking at the wall and seeing one pop out smiling. I screamed, but even then, I realized I had beckoned it with fear. Since then, I've occasionally manifested fears during extreme negative emotions, but I've learned to control it. It really feels like there's a world behind our world. I have to be careful not to manifest evil into it because it might happen again. And now, moving on to our next story. And for the first time on this podcast, we're going to explore aliens and alien encounters. Our next story was posted 2 years ago in r/humanoid encounters. OP asks, has anyone else encountered people that didn't seem like real people? I was wondering if anyone else has ever experienced people who didn't quite seem like people, like there was something just off about them. I had one encounter that I've never been able to shake. This happened in Charleston, South Carolina around Christmas of 2017. I used to work at a popular coffee shop inside of a big box retail store. One day, 2 guests came in who immediately struck me as odd. They were pale Caucasian women, probably in their 20s, who looked nearly identical, except one was a head taller than the other. They both had perfectly straight platinum blonde bowl cuts, round faces, and very large hazel eyes. Not alien disproportionate exactly, but noticeably bigger than normal. Their gait was stiff, like they had boards strapped on their backs, and they shuffled when they walked. Both wore oversized sweaters, and I later noticed the shorter one had hers on backwards. But the stranger part was their behavior. When they first entered, the shorter one looked around as though she had never been inside of a store before. Her demeanor was childlike. Trying to be a good customer service rep, I welcomed them and told them to ask if they had any questions. The short girl looked to the tall one for approval. The taller one gave a slow nod, and then the shorter girl turned to me, mouth slightly opened, and attempted to wave. But instead of waving at the wrist, she waved from the forearm, palms stiff and flat, moving side to side like a robotic windshield wiper. Then she looked back at the taller one, who gave her another encouraging nod. They wandered around the cafe, looking at cups and merchandise. The short girl would point to things constantly, seemingly asking the taller one questions. Seemingly asking the taller one questions, almost like she was on a guided tour. Now, I live in a tourist city, and I've met people from all over the world. Even if I can't identify the exact language people are speaking, I can usually tell its origin. Germanic, Slavic, Asiatic, Middle Eastern, etc. But the language these two spoke to each other was unlike anything I've ever heard before. It was strange, like a mix between Simlish and sped-up baby babble. Lots of gaz, blahs, and ooh sounds. They picked up and examined almost everything, opening cups, squeezing bags of beans, even taking apart a French press while the other taller one seemed to explain it. After about 10 minutes, the shorter one chose a studded cup to purchase. She shuffled to the counter, setting the cup down but frequently glancing at her companion for reassurance. The taller one would give her a simple nod, then she looked at me and tried to smile, baring only her top teeth as if biting her lip. Nodding slowly but saying nothing. That's when I noticed her backward sweater tag sticking out. She was oddly attractive, but there was something uncanny about her appearance that gave me the chills. I also don't recall either one of them ever blinking. I rang up the cup and gave my usual checkout spiel, but she didn't respond. When it came time to pay, she pulled out a silver credit card, but it was completely blank. No logo, no numbers, no name, just plain metallic plastic with a chip. She muttered something to the taller one, who stepped in and finished the transaction for her, showing her how to use it as though it was a teaching moment. I handed her the cup, and once again she gave me a stiff nod, mouth ajar, followed by a windshield wiper wave. Then they both shuffled away into the store. I never saw them again. I've told this story before, and people usually brush it off. Maybe they were European tourists, or maybe they had a medical condition, but I've met countless foreigners, and none of them have ever acted that unfamiliar with their surroundings. Their entire demeanor gave me uncanny valley vibes. I can't rule out ordinary explanations, but it's just never sat right with me. It was just way too weird. What do you think? Has anyone experienced anything similar? We do have an edit. So in the edit, OP writes, I never expected this post to blow up. Thank you for the award, stories, and theories. I appreciate all of it. I want to clarify a few details that I feel like I undersold. They were practically identical. Exact age, exact complexion, hairstyle, and presence. The only difference is their heights, the sweater, and the taller one's sharper nose, the shorter one's faster speech. They weren't mother-daughter or caretaker-patient unless they reproduce by mitosis. Twin sisters? Maybe. Their eyes. They were not as exaggerated as gray aliens, but still larger than they should have been. Their skin. It was absolutely flawless. No scars, no creases, blemishes, or even pores. Almost like they were wearing an Instagram filter. Their complexion had an ethereal quality. Their curiosity. They pointed at nearly everything. The menu signs, the equipment, shopping carts, even the automatic sliding doors. It reinforced the idea that the shorter one, at least, had never been to a place like this before. Regarding the autism theory in the comments, I've worked with many people on the spectrum, with and without language barriers, and never once thought, I'm not sure if this person is human. This just felt different. That said, I can't absolutely rule it out. So he does provide another update, but it's a very late update. They did edit the post a second time, and in their second edit, they write, I came across an image online that nearly made me fall out of my chair. If you gave this woman a bowl cut and rounded out her chin, she'd look almost exactly like the two women that I saw. Apparently, this image was originally created by a Photoshop artist back in 2014, but later circulated amongst UFO enthusiasts as a mock-up of a Pleiadian. I don't think that's what the artist's original intent was, but the resemblance was uncanny enough that I absolutely had to edit this post and share. So this story actually immediately made me think of an article I read years and years ago. I was able to track it down and I summarized it a little bit, and it'll be tagged in the comments, or at least the person who the article is about will be tagged in the comments. So you will be able to go and explore that and go down that rabbit hole. But back in 2014, CNET reported on an interview with Paul Hellyer, who was Canada's former defense minister. And he has long claimed that aliens have been visiting Earth for thousands of years. So in the interview, Hellyer had said that there are at least 4 known alien species regularly monitoring us here on Earth. Though he's heard reports that it could be as many as 80, he believes that alien activity had ramped up after we invented the atomic bomb, since it had signaled to the rest of the cosmos that humanity had become a threat. According to him, most alien species are peaceful and even want to help us live more sustainably. He also suggested that they have already shared technology with us, things like microchips, Kevlar vests, and other additional inventions he claims actually came from alien technology. But they're holding back on giving us more until we stop waging wars on each other and stop behaving irresponsibly. In other words, we could have access to far greater technology if we just showed that we were ready for it. But in this article, and this is what sparked my memory, is that Hellyer, in this article or in interviews, he often recounted stories of aliens blending in with us. And he said that there were these Nordic blondes and short grays. And he even references a story of 2 aliens disguised as nuns shopping in Las Vegas. So if anybody wants to deep dive into that further, I will tag the information below. But we'll get into some comments now. One commenter shares their own experience. They write, I used to work warehouse shifts that started at 5 a.m. Normally I'd leave my house at around 4:40, but one morning in 2017, I was running late and didn't leave until 4:55. Maybe if I had left earlier, this wouldn't have happened. I drove towards the freeway. The on-ramp curved like a hairpin under an overpass. And as I rounded it, I noticed a nice white sports car parked in the median. Odd, but I ignored it and kept driving. Not long after, my headlights caught sight of a figure walking in the median. A man in a white tank top and white shorts heading in the same direction that I was. I was driving too fast to stop, but something compelled me to throw my truck in reverse and ask if he needed a ride. It was a black man covered in dirt, not just dirty, but caked in soil on his face, shoulders, and arms. I asked if he'd run out of gas, and he just nodded. During the ride, he hardly spoke. He only echoed my words back to me in fragments. When we neared my exit, I said I'd drop him off at the gas station. Instead, he just pointed straight ahead, silently. I still turned into the station. He got out wordlessly and walked behind my truck, heading off into the night, but not into the station itself. What gave me chills is, 1, the white car was parked in a grassy median. No mud, no soil anywhere. Where did the dirt come from that was caked all over him? 2, why did he only repeat my words back to me? 3, why was I compelled to stop at all? I've never met a man like that. My mom thought it was maybe a demon. I don't know, but the memory still gives me chills. Another commenter also shared their experience, writing, "It was around 8:45 p.m. in the summer. I was furious at having to serve customers while cleaning one of 5 deli slicers alone. 2 men walked in, tall, over 6 feet, hairless with pale, almost albino skin, and dull eyes. They wore identical black trench coats, hats, and shoes, completely out of season. They were socially awkward, and one of them blurted out, 'We've been watching you.' I laughed nervously and replied, 'Oh yeah? Well, I hope I'm doing an excellent job then.' But their stares unnerved me. It wasn't sexual, not casual, just locked on my face without breaking eye contact. They didn't even look at each other. At first, I thought they might be corporate secret shoppers, but no report ever came in. At that time in my life, I was a heavy smoker who spent a lot of nights sky watching, observing odd lights, strange phenomenon, and often UFOs. Can't help wondering if I wasn't the only one that was watching." Another commenter chimed in saying, "This is a story that my grandmother told me when I was a child. She grew up in rural Missouri near Rolla in the early 1900s. One fall night, she woke up needing to use the outhouse. She hated leaving her warm bed, but she went outside, did her business, and came back in. Wide awake from the cold, she crawled into bed with her sisters. As she glanced out the window, she saw 3 tall, white-colored beings walking stiffly up the same path she had just used. They moved strangely, stiff and unnatural, before disappearing into the wood line. When she told her mother the next day, her mother dismissed it as a dream, but my grandmother swore she was wide awake. When she told me the story, I was around 10 or 12. She still had insisted to that day that it had really happened. Aliens weren't even on her radar back then. She thought that they were ghosts. I've carried her story with me ever since, and I believe her." Taking a different approach, which was echoed in the comments, one commenter chimes in with a possible explanation, saying, "If the story is real, my guess is that they were cult members. Think about it. No accent, no awareness of how the outside world works, but access to a credit card with no markings. Either that's a wealthy heiress or someone under a cult's control. The identical appearances and strange gait could have explanations less exotic than aliens. For example, oversized sweaters to cover restraint or even kinkier. Wealthy people with eccentric tastes often bankrolled cult-like groups, sometimes for sex or control. Could also be trafficking, cult slaves sent out for errands with a cult card. The uncanny valley vibe may be from the conditioning that they'd undergone. It's less likely that they were aliens, more likely something dark, human, and hidden." OP does respond to comments that it could be a cult or something involving trafficking, saying they can't rule it out, but they certainly hope that that's not the case, because that would have been really, truly awful based on what he saw, if that was the explanation as to what was happening. Moving on to our next story. Our next story was posted in r/experiencers a year ago. It is titled, "The First Time I Met a Tall White and What He Taught Me." OP writes, "This happened last year in November. I was up early in the morning and I found I didn't have to work that day. I decided to meditate. Suddenly, a being somehow approached me from the backdrop of space asking to connect. I did, and I felt as though it was a very tall, skinny, pale, kind, and intelligent being, taller than the Greys that I know and had met. I asked what this being was curious about, and the being humbly asked me for some data. He said, I would like to see humans interact with their pets, if that's all right. He gestured to my cat near my body. I looked at my kitty, and the being said empathically, yes, as there were some communication errors between us till that point. So I pet my cat and conveyed to the being how I understand my cat's cues, and how we share space and affection for one another. The being was very pleased. He said, it's the same. We call our dear animal companions differently, but the relationship dynamic is the same as humans have for their pets. This is good data. Thank you for sharing. He was very grateful to me, and I was happy to help. I decided to ask him if I could have some information from him in exchange for my help, and he agreed easily, saying, ask anything of me. I first asked to see him more clearly, and he agreed readily. I teleported to his location with my astral body and sensed that I was in a dimly lit ship of some kind. I was immediately struck by his appearance. I am just over 5 feet tall, and he was easily double my height. He was white other than his eyes, not like a white human being. He glowed white. His skin was shining with a white color, and he had a white emanating aura about 2 to 3 inches from his body. His eyes were dark, but I didn't get a good look at them. He was, however, tall and lanky, akin to the Greys I normally meet, who are usually between 6 and 7.5 feet tall. I then asked him about his group in the context of how it relates to other groups in space, around Earth at that moment. I told him that a lot of humans on Earth were confused about the dynamics of different beings around Earth, and that if he could give me any clarifying information to communicate with my fellow humans, it would help a lot because there's a lot of confusion there. He agreed eagerly and said, oh, I can help with that easily. He showed me a circle and said, imagine that this circle represents a defining line separating the inner part where ETs that are interested in all Earth has to offer are, and the outer area. Outside the circle is where the ETs are that have no interest in Earth at all. I visualized the circle, and he added that the line itself is what separated the groups, noting that groups inside the circle but closer to the line would be less interested in Earth than groups farther into the center. Then he said, now visualize a very small circle in the center of the large one. That is Earth. I did that, then he projected the circle high above me, with the Earth circle still inside it. He made it huge, like a planetarium display above my head. He said, now I will add the groups, and the large circle filled with a bunch of small ovals representing ET groups, some clustered near Earth, others near the outer area of the big circle, and even more outside of the circle. I asked him how many ovals, or groups, were outside the circle. He laughed and said, a truly endless amount. There is no end to all that there is out there to be found. So I looked at all the ovals and asked him about the ones clustered around Earth, marked by a line from Earth to them. He said, the ones close to Earth communicate that they walk the Earth in some sense. They have outposts on Earth or otherwise interact with human in some direct or some physical way. I asked about one oval that overlapped with Earth, and he said, those are reptilian-like groups native to Earth. They overlap because Earth is also their home. He used the phrase in parenthesis because he was borrowing my terminology for them, saurians. Then he said, now I will show you categories to distinguish these groups. He created 4 distinctions and made the whole representation a 3D transparent sphere within a sphere with 3D ovals in my mind's eye. The first group were ETs interacting with humans for humanity's benefit. The second group were ETs interacting with humans for their own benefit. The third was ETs interacting with or studying Earth life other than humans. And the fourth was ETs studying or interacting with Earth itself. He projected those distinctions onto the big sphere, and the majority of the ovals sorted into these categories, from closest to Earth to farthest. Most fell between the first 2 distinctions. He showed that a sizable number of groups weren't even here for humans at all, but for animals, plants, the Earth itself. Some groups belong to several categories at the same time. I asked which group he was in, and he showed me that his group existed between 1 and 3, halfway from Earth to the outer sphere. I asked how his group was that way, and he explained that in his civilization, it is known that all living beings occupy niches that overlap with surrounding life forms. He explained that in the forest, all creatures overlap areas and lifestyles, and in encountering with each other, intrinsic boundaries are communicated between them. He taught me that every interaction with other creatures is actually a communication of boundaries, even if we haven't realized it. He continued, his civilization, being aware of that, lives harmoniously with many life forms on their planet. He says humans are already close to this, since many of the animals share urban environments with humans, even if humans don't like it or notice it. He explained that his group's goal is to learn enough about humans and Earth animals to show humans how to live harmoniously with other creatures in a safe, natural, non-polluting way. And to that end, he is learning about humans and their pets. I dwelled on the sphere diagram he was showing me and asked why some ovals inside the circle didn't fall in any of the categories. He laughed and said, "Some ETs are here to study ETs, not humans and not Earth." I was surprised, but he laughed again. Some civilizations just don't prioritize humans. Humans might only ever see them in the background of ships interacting with other ETs. I asked what those outlier groups were studying, and he said, "Some of what they are here for is so abstract that you physically cannot imagine it, even if I tried to show or explain it to you." I shared my amazement, and he agreed, saying this was inevitable for a civilization as young as humanity. I thanked him and asked if I could know his name, to honor him and his knowledge, and to give humans a way to recognize him. He showed me a concept, some physical principle that separates distinct things, matter, vibrations, complexities. I didn't quite understand. He looked through my memories and said his name was surface tension. I thanked surface tension for his time, and he thanked me for mine, and the connection ended. So we have a couple of updates. The first one is May 20th, 2023. The OP writes, "Hi everyone, it seems a lot of you have questions for surface tension, though I think boundary potential is a better phrase. I'll make a comment saying, ask your questions here, that way if I connect with him again, I can gather them all." Update number 2, May 21st, 2023. Phew, first round of questions and comments answered. Once this post dies down, I'll put up another one so further discussions can happen with more context. But I want to tie up loose ends here first. Thanks again, everyone. I really enjoyed meeting him. So for this story, we'll jump right into the comments. Our first commenter writes, "This is so refreshing for me. I'm so curious though. I had an experience while working in a world-famous amusement park. I saw 2 tall whites in normal human clothes coming towards the exit and entrance area where I was stationed. The thousands of people in that area all looked away from them, which I noticed right away as being the power of compulsion. That power doesn't work on me, and I can shield my energies from being perceived, so I basically hid in plain sight from them. They felt very threatening to me. The Greys kind of stalked me when I was little and refused to be taken. Like a small one got into my room and went invisible and tried to jump on me, but my late grandmother appeared and banished it. I don't know, but it happened, and I was scared of the Greys. However, I felt like I was in actual danger if the tall whites could tell that I saw them and their 14-foot selves, potentially another hostile to human race projecting the tall whites' image upon them. Thank you for sharing all that you do." OP responded to this comment saying, "You know, since I only had one experience with a tall white ET, I cannot be sure that all of them share the same culture, origin, or mindset. If I remember correctly, boundary potential is 10 feet tall, but you're saying that you saw a 14-foot tall being. This may be because they are actually different beings from different groups. With that out of the way, I do want to mention that I primarily have contact experiences with tall Greys being 7 feet tall, and they've been visiting me my entire life. I wonder if you maybe had similar circumstances, since you seem pretty sensitive to ET presences." The initial commenter responded to OP saying, "I do. The Greys tried to take me when I was 5, but I didn't allow it. Then tall and short ones were standing in the air outside of my window trying to get in. I had faith that my superhero curtains would keep them out. They stalked me for around a year like that. Then that one summer Saturday afternoon, a short one got into my room and I was caught off guard from my 6-year-old version of shielding my room. It went invisible. As soon as it went to jump on me, my grandmother, who had passed away when I was 2 and I was 4 at the time, appeared as a light being and cast it out of my room. She didn't speak to me, but I guess she communicated telepathically, as I knew that she was asking if I was okay. And then she imparted knowledge of putting basically a force field around my room to keep them out. After that, I did the force field thing and they eventually stopped coming to try to take me. They terrified me. But I remember the first time they tried to take me. I woke up feeling absolutely enraged and disrespected. Like I knew that they should know better than to try to take me, and I just find that to be so intriguing. I do not know about many of my past lives, except for my most recent one before this one, and maybe one from a few hundred years ago, but just a glimpse of the second. I have a good friend and an acquaintance who has had the same experiences with the tall whites as well. They definitely have to be a different species or culture because I just know that my instincts are never wrong. I also imagine, just like with humans, that there are good and bad of any species or culture. However, the fact that my grandmother, who had already passed away, was able to viscerally interact and cast out the greys means to me that the greys are extra-dimensional, not extraterrestrial. I've gone through and have been reading some of your posts, and you are so right about the fact that we have control. And it doesn't matter which higher power we invoke, because in reality, we are just invoking our own will and, in my opinion, our own higher selves. Another commenter chimed in a new comment thread. That's awesome. I've had the same weird experiences with these orbs for about 6 months now. At first, when I saw them, they looked like they were searching for something or mapping out terrain. And then I realized that one was directly above me and observing me watching them. They never left after that night. There have been at least 4 or 5 that I've noticed, and 1 or 2 that are different. There's one that is 3 orbs or lights. When it moves, the 2 outer lights rotate around the middle light. I'm not sure if it is one or if they gather together to do this. Sometimes I'll be looking for them, and they will flash at me, like a camera flash. And then when I make eye contact with them, they will scurry behind a tree line. When they start moving fast, they leave a trail of light behind them. The light is odd though. It starts to stagger. It's hard to explain how it looks, but my wife witnessed it and asked me why it did that before I ever got the chance to tell her about it. It's like it was going so fast that the light can't keep up. That's another weird thing about them. When I try to video them, it's like they're black dots, but the light doesn't show up in the camera. When I first saw them, they were zigzagging all over the horizon. Now they are stationary most of the time until I look at them for about a minute. They look like a hazy star most of the time. I even moved an hour and a half away from where I initially saw them and moved into a city close to an airport. After a couple of weeks, sure enough, I saw them again. They were way harder to see though because of all the light pollution. Anyways, your story really interests me because I am preparing to go on a journey. I've had a hard time meditating due to being bipolar and having ADD, but I am planning to do some mushrooms to try to meditate and communicate with them. I am really excited and nervous at the same time. Before I moved to the city, I was on the phone with my mom and I saw one on the horizon. Then I noticed this weird cloud that was lit up. It literally looked like it had a surfboard sticking out the top of the cloud, almost like something had just flown through it and altered its shape. I went to take a night photo and accidentally had the flash on. I got disconnected from my mom right as I took the picture. As soon as I let the camera down, I saw the bright light come out of the clouds right in front of me. It was biblical. The light was as bright as the sun and similar in color. Fight or flight kicked in, and I turned around and booked it to the RV and started yelling for my wife to come look. I never turned around until after I was at the RV, and when I did turn around, I saw the clouds all lit up but closer to me and at different spots, like it had followed me from a distance. I pulled my camera out and caught the ends of it as it pulled into the clouds. I believe I may have made a mistake by not keeping my ground and seeing what happened. When I take these mushrooms, I'm going to find a secluded spot and meditate. I want to know if they are interested in me. I'm nothing special. I don't live a very exciting life, but for some reason they are watching me. My only thoughts as to why they would be interested in me is because I had seen them, or that I've met them in another life, or that they're able to see my thoughts and feelings, and those are a constant thing. OP replied to this comment. I see, yeah, ADD does make it hard. I've got that too. I say meditate, but for me it's when I clear my mind, it doesn't quite go quiet, it just calms down. I see all of my thoughts as fish swimming chaotically above and around me metaphorically. When I meditate, the fish slow down and start to swim like a school, gathered, organized, cohesive, and focused. I hope this explanation helps you in your meditative practice. I think mushrooms are definitely a good way to try to contact for a beginner. Once you know the feeling, you can begin to try to replicate it sober, though that was not my method. It sounds like either way, the ETs would have put on a show whether you stayed in that spot or not, from my perspective. Definitely a good idea to seclude for the mushroom trip. Make sure trusted people know where you will be, though, as a precaution. I imagine it must be confusing to see how much interest they have in you. I do think it's something intrinsic about you that they like. I really hope you find out what it is in your journey. I haven't had experiences with orbs or orb sightings, but many other people have, and it's one of the ways ETs show themselves to people they care for. Thank you for sharing your experience and for the interesting, thought-provoking conversation. Have fun. Our third commenter here writes, what is your take on reptilians and the idea that they live among us? What's their purpose or presence? Our OP responded to commenter 3. Well, I asked the tall gray about them because I myself was curious about them. When I was a kid, the grays I know made me promise not to initiate contact in any way with any reptilian-like beings. So I haven't spoken to any that fit the description the grays provided me with. What the grays I know told me about the saurians, which are the reptilian beings, is that they already live in harmony with Earth unlike humans. They told me that saurian civilization is split on how to approach the growth of humanity across the surface. I was told about 50% want to take the approach that off-world reptilian groups propose, which is a form of subjugation, objectification, and domination of humanity. They told me that the other half of the saurian population, roughly half, want to coexist with us in a balanced and equal way, in harmony with our planet. As for those not native to our planet, I've only met one kind of scaly ET. They were lovely and kind, not really reptilian-looking either. I have, however, met reptilian-looking beings briefly in my astral travels, but I end up fighting them and giving them the slip. I won't speak as any kind of expert on their behavior or intentions, but many other experiencers have spoken of their brashness and occasional superiority complexes. Some have spoken of them with affection, but many more have said that they do horrible things to people and see humanities as animals meant to be kept and eaten. I believe that reptilian-looking beings like humans are unique individuals, whether or not their civilization has a stance against our civilization. It does appear reptilian groups do many horrible things to humans, but that is not the sum total of who they are, and I want everyone to find out more about these groups so that they can avoid the bad ETs and hold them accountable and foster relationships with the good ones, regardless of how they look or where they came from. Commenter number 4 writes, how the heck did we go thousands of years without knowledge of those saurians? So I assume they live underground, but where? How do they breathe oxygen? Where are the entrances from the surface to their territories? I like that new term that I didn't hear up to this point. They are now referred to as saurians instead of reptilians, as a saurian came from a dinosaur. So what? When the meteorite hit Earth and killed dinosaurs, some survived and hid themselves in caves until they found bigger caves and evolved into reptilian humanoids? Or were some genetic mutations in play and hybridization, again to save some descendants of dinosaurs because it's a common rule to preserve animal kinds? So some other alien civilization could turn dinosaurs into humanoids through genetic manipulation and hybrid processes to keep some of the former dinosaur genes in saurians? Or have saurians evolved in parallel with dinosaurs on their own and have decided it would be best to live somewhere safer below? OP responded saying, I think in older societies, older than ours, they did show up to us and were revered as gods or great teachers. It's likely that Earth has more than 3 physical dimensions. We can only conceptually perceive 3. If that is the case, they might be closer to underground than we realize. But it would be very hard for us to figure out where. I have been told that saurians have advanced technology developed by their own civilization. It's not a stretch in the slightest to say that they have oxygen-creating tech. I mean, we have trees, it's not that hard. They could be all around us for all we know, or even in the ocean. It's possible that they phase through the earth of our planet and pop down to huge bubbles in Earth's mantle where they may live. I think reptilian is a better catch-all word for lizard reptile-looking beings from space. But since we have some that are not from space, we can call those saurians. I think they were humanoids before the mass extinction took place. I was told by other ETs that saurians survived the extinction event by preemptively preparing homes and refuge deep underground. My guess is that saurians are partially hybrids, but I've been told that we have some of their DNA in ours, but maybe we are just their descendants. I've been told that they lived in parallel and that before the extinction event, they had a massive technological society on the surface of Earth. I was told most traces of their technology on the surface were wiped out by the extinction event. Our next commenter asks, but why are these groups so interested in Earth? We are a literal hot mess of a planet. Surely there must be better planets to explore? OP responded to this comment saying, hot mess is the reason. Life-rich planets like Earth are rare. Ones with budding young civilizations are even rarer. Add to that the massive extinction event and dying off of other life forms on our planet because of us, and we're basically a golden, time-sensitive opportunity for conservation, study, intervention, and civilization-wide teaching. Our next story was posted in r/aliens about a year ago, and it's titled, My Alien Abduction Story. Has anyone else experienced something similar? OP starts off with a disclaimer. There is no way I can prove that any of this is factual. I have zero evidence, but maybe, just maybe, someone else has experienced something similar. I also don't fully know how to explain what I saw or some of the things that I heard, but I will try my best. Back in September 2020, I went to bed like normal. I fell asleep after 10 minutes or so. Then I woke up at around 3 a.m. I was lying in bed, looking at the ceiling, my head tilted slightly to the back right. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see my nightstand, my lamp, and my clock. The clock said it was 3-something. I woke with a bizarre, dreadful feeling, and my entire body was vibrating from head to toe. At first I thought, God, I hate sleep paralysis. Here we effing go. I told myself, wake up, wake up, wake up. But then it hit me. I was already fully conscious, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't move. My eyes were the only thing that I could control. The vibrations intensified, like my whole body was buzzing, the way a limb feels when it's falling asleep, but everywhere. Panic set in. This wasn't my usual sleep paralysis. Then I felt something lifting me off of the bed. A wave of dread unlike anything that I'd ever felt had rushed through me. In my mind, a thought suddenly entered. You are being taken. I screamed on the inside, trying my hardest to resist, but I kept rising until I was no longer touching my bed. My eyes drew closer and closer to the ceiling, and then everything went dark. Suddenly, I was looking down at my roof. I was floating higher into the air, maybe 250 feet up, and still rising. To my surprise, the fear lifted completely, replaced by a strange calm. From that vantage point, the neighborhood looked bizarre, maybe just because we rarely see our homes from that angle. As I rotated in the air and climbed higher, I spotted it, a silver-gray disc above me, with a black opening at its center. I rose towards it, closer and closer, until I passed inside. Then it was dark again. When I came to, I was looking down at Earth from space. I was inside of the craft, standing on some kind of platform, looking through transparent walls. Earth was below, but I could also see the planets above me and around me, as if I was free-floating, except my feet were clearly planted. Then 3 beings approached me from behind. I didn't see them, but I knew that there were 3 of them. They introduced themselves telepathically. 2 males and 1 female, all over 7 feet tall. Based on their communication, I assume they might have been Nordics, but that's just my guess since all I really know is their gender and height. One of them, a male, conveyed to me something like, "Come and see." Not words exactly, but feelings and imagery. Instantly, we accelerated away from Earth, not like a sci-fi warp drive. No blue tunnel, just Earth shrinking impossibly fast until it vanished. I must have blacked out because the next thing I remember was looking through the transparent wall again. This time, the planet I was looking at wasn't Earth. I knew this because from a distance, Earth looks blue with oceans, but this planet looked green all over. OP does include a stock photo for reference of a green exoplanet, which I will include. OP continues, as we approached, the being said, "Come and see." We pierced the atmosphere seamlessly and flew over a vast, vibrantly blue body of water. Sunlight sparkled on the surface. I thought, Jesus, this water is beautiful. The beings told me this water has not been altered in any way. It is in the most natural and beautiful state. Soon a landmass appeared ahead. Dense, green jungle running straight to the water's edge. No beaches. Along the shoreline stood crystalline buildings shaped like seamless spinning tops with no jolts or bolts. I tried to recreate them in a drawing, but nothing matched what I saw. The craft moved inwards towards a massive structure like a hangar. We landed and the being said, "We are here, come and see." Outside, I found myself in a futuristic city that seemed built into nature, not against it. Buildings flowed seamlessly with the landscapes. Hundreds of people, all fair-skinned, Caucasian, dressed in purple, royal-looking robes, filled the center square. They greeted each other warmly. "Nice to see you. How are you?" But none of them moved their mouths. I asked how I could hear them. The beings explained, this is their form of what you call a hive mind, but different from what you are thinking. They showed me that each person was linked through an advanced neural connection, like telepathy via technology. Everyone still had autonomy, but communication was instant, like a built-in version of a phone call. I saw people carrying glass pads, like iPads made of clear materials. Others approached floating glass cubes that projected beams of light between them. They would insert their hands into the beams to transmit or receive data. The beings told me this is their internet. They transmit information via light. Everything in this civilization worked with light, shaped, molded, and controlled like clay. The being said, "These people have achieved global peace. There are no wars, no illness. Everyone understands each other. They have perfected society. They do not infringe on nature, but work with it." I understood. This was meant to show me that humanity too could move beyond self-destruction. They gave me a comparison. Earth is like an old, broken down Honda Civic. This planet is like a brand new, all-electric Lamborghini. Outside the city, I saw a crystalline machine pounding rhythmically into the mountain. Each strike sent a vibration through the ground, a pulse I could feel in my body. I don't know what it was for, but it seemed to be transmitting energy. Then the beings told me, it's time to go back. We returned to the disk, left the atmosphere, and shot back into space. As we neared Earth, I saw London below, Big Ben and scaffolding. From high above, one of the beings laughed and said, "It's always funny to me that we are right here this close and the people down there have no idea we are here." Then they said, "It's time for you to go back." The return back felt like teleportation. Suddenly, my rooftop was below. I descended through the roof back into my bedroom. As I re-entered my body, the vibrations returned, the paralysis, the locking sensation. And then I snapped awake, panicked, bolting upright like a horror movie. The clock read 3:40 a.m. It didn't feel like a dream at all. It was vivid, clear, continuous. I was fully conscious the entire time. The memory is sharper than any waking experience I've had. That's my story. Has anyone ever gone through something similar? One commenter writes, "It sounds like you had an out-of-body experience. Maybe they just took your soul?" The more I read about these advanced, live and work in perfect harmony civilizations, the more it sounds like personal autonomy goes out the window and we become a hive mind. Almost like worker bees. No wars or dissent because no one has passions or disagreements, or personal desires or any ambition. If Earth is a prison planet or variation thereof, maybe that's why it's so chaotic. This is where the non-conformers are housed, LOL. OP responds to this saying, "God, that made me feel some type of way. Like it sounded so nice, but at the same time, eh." Someone else chimed into this common thread and said, "This is what some Scientologists believe. that Prison Planet is for the non-conforming souls, the free thinkers, the artists, the revolutionaries, etc. Someone else comments, I've posted my experience before. You can look at my history, but here it is. I've had a CE3K, a close encounter of the third kind, when I was about 9 years old, and a CE1K when I was 19 and after I joined the army. My first encounter, CE3K, close encounter of a third kind, was in Nevada, USA. I was in my room at night, probably around 1 a.m. or something, on the second floor of my childhood home. Now, I've never told the story because I've been afraid I would start to lose people at this point. I remember being engulfed in debilitating fear to the point where I hid underneath my blanket and could not move and could barely breathe. I don't entirely know how, but I remember suddenly being inside a craft that was outside of my bedroom window. Whether it was an out-of-body experience or not, I still don't know. But inside this craft were two beings that I'm sure of, maybe 3 in total, and they did not speak to me, but rather told me with their eyes that they wanted to return me. I don't know where they wanted to return me to, but within what felt like an instant, we were suddenly in outer space, and I could see Earth behind us. I remember telling, or rather thinking to these beings, that I didn't want to leave my family. Suddenly I was back in my bed, wide awake. The beings looked like typical greys, but I don't recall them even having mouths, not even a slit where their mouth should be. The inside of the craft seemed to be almost entirely empty except for the chairs that they sat on. And I remember I could see through the walls to the outside as if they were made of glass. The craft itself I think was some kind of disc shape, but I can't be certain. Pretty soon after this experience, I was overcome with severe anxiety. I remember the next morning telling my sister about the experience as if I was recalling a dream, but it definitely felt different than any dream I had ever had. I remember it to this day. I don't know many people who remember dreams their entire life. Someone else chimes in and says, although I lean towards your story being made up, I have a couple of points to contribute. 1. In hundreds of UFO abductions, the abductees reported that they weren't physically abducted. Instead, they had an out-of-body experience and were taken aboard a UFO. UFO occupants definitely have the technology to induce an OBE in a human. 2. In most out-of-body experiences, the experiencers reported a strong vibrating sensation in their bodies just prior to the OBE. 3. In one of his books, journalist John Keel wrote about a strange phenomenon he noticed. In most encounters with UFO occupants, there were exactly 3 aliens. Since I read that in his book, I've read various books and websites that describe hundreds of UFO occupant encounters over many decades. I would estimate that in about 40 to 50% of them, exactly 3 aliens were seen near or inside the UFO. You would expect the number to be fairly random, like sometimes 1 alien, sometimes 2, sometimes 4 or more, etc. But no, for some reason, aliens most commonly interact with people or encounter them in groups of 3. 4. Most people don't realize this, but the so-called Nordic aliens are probably the second most widely reported in UFO encounters, with the Greys being number 1. 5. The Nordics have told humans that they can program people using light. 6. The book Mass Dreams of the Future by Chuppy Snow, Helen Warnbach. They used hypnosis to have people report on their past life experiences. They also had people try to report on their future lives. They found a bizarre result. The human population on Earth will decrease by nearly 95% in the next 40 to 60 years or so. Some global catalyst will affect the Earth and reduce humanity. They had the survivors describe what their future bodies and clothing look like, and many of them reported that they looked like tall humans with pale white skin, high cheekbones, slim figures, and they were wearing long flowing robes. The authors of the book didn't know at the time, but this is exactly how many UFO witnesses report that the Nordic aliens look like, or the clothing that they wear. I think some of the people in the book also mentioned that in their future lives, they, the people not the Nordics, communicated via telepathy, via an implanted device. And finally, several UFO researchers have concluded that the real reason aliens are interested in humanity is to manipulate human genetics for some desired outcome, and that they have been doing this for thousands of years. This might be who the humans you claimed you saw were. One commenter asks, My question is, how do you definitely conclude that it wasn't an unusually vivid dream or perhaps even an episode of psychosis? These are explanations supported by evidence which you have seemingly not considered before reaching the conclusion that this was definitely an abduction. I'm not saying that your experience wasn't what you're claiming it is, or that it was just a dream or an episode of psychosis. My point is that you have committed to a very specific interpretation, and so you must have a mechanism that rules out these other candidate explanations if you're going to commit to a specific explanation, especially one that is so unprecedented. If you have such a mechanism to make that determination, then you can describe that mechanism to us. If you don't have such a mechanism, then you're making an irrational conclusion because you're ruling out things before you have a real way of legitimately ruling them out. OP does reply to this comment saying, "Good question. I've thought about this a lot. Definitely not psychosis or a psychotic break. I am of sound and sober mind. Based on the diagnostic criteria for psychosis, this doesn't fall within that realm at all. As for it all being a vivid dream, the only problem is this experience had a conscious beginning and timeline of events that was in sequential order up until the return point. I don't know if anyone has dreams that follow a timeline with a beginning of the experience, moving to the story and substance, moving to returning to the exact same place where the experience began. It was way, way too real to be a dream. Believe me, I have thought long and hard about this, and the only reasonable conclusion to me is that it actually happened." Somebody else comments, "Downloading and uploading information by light, that is exactly how the internet works, especially fiber optic internet. Light signals and information travel as light packets through the flexible fiber optic wiring. The most reliable and fastest internet we have available by Earth humans." OP responded to this saying, "Yes, although they did it without any wiring. No fiber optics or anything else like that, just pure light data transmission, if that makes sense." We have one final story, and then we will wrap up this episode. Our final story was posted as an article to medium.com in 2004. The article is titled, "Aroosha, the Blue Alien, Visited Me. What she told me will blow your mind." Yes, this happened, and it was one of the greatest gifts of my life. As a level-headed, rational person, I never expected to share a story that could make me sound crazy, but it's true, it happened, and I was shocked by what came afterwards. Back in May of 2024, I experienced a Kundalini awakening. Yoga tradition describes this as a transformative moment when you feel a connection or oneness with all beings in the known and unknown universe. For me, it was like that and so much more. Afterwards, I spent a week staring at the ocean, trying to figure out what my life would be like going forward. I knew one thing. I wanted to change everything, and I wanted to change it now. Life after that awakening was different. For most of my life, as a founder and business coach, I'd noticed that information flowed through me, not just from me. I used to call it inspiration, but I now realized it was more than that. I was channeling, although I didn't even know it. Eventually, I began to sense a presence that called itself Maxwell. Maxwell would speak through me under difficult circumstances, but not at will. Only through deep meditation could I sometimes make contact. After my awakening, Maxwell became more available. I started working with strangers as a channel, bringing wisdom through me to assist people. And I loved doing that. Not long after, I developed a deep interest in Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. Through a series of synchronicities, I ended up at his advanced retreat, a week with 1,900 others, meditating together in a massive ballroom. By day 6, Dr. Joe Dispenza had us assembled at 4 a.m., when melatonin peaks and the pineal gland is most accessible. The 5-hour meditation that followed changed everything for me. Around 3 hours in, fully immersed in the experience, a woman appeared. She was tall, 8 or 9 feet tall. Her skin was blue, her eyes pale blue, and her energy was gentle and calming. Behind her stood 3 others like disciples. There were no words, but communication was powerful and transparent. As I connected, a jolt of electricity shot through my body. We seemed to merge for a direct connection. My body vibrated involuntarily, and I sensed a massive download. She told me her name was Aroosha. The merging was a transfer of knowledge, mostly nonverbal, much of it emotional and healing. As it ended, I heard one word, upgraded, And then the disciples connected with me, one by one, each sending another wave of knowledge, though gentler than hers. When they left, I felt complete, as if something missing had been restored. Still deep in meditation, I was flooded with images, possible futures one after another, being filed away in my mind, indexed somehow, though I couldn't hold them individually. I saw 7 concentric circles forming slowly around me, glowing as they built from the outside inwards until they reached my light body at the center. I was shown the future. I felt Aroosha knew my destiny and had given me the tools to fulfill it. In a previous channeling session with Maxwell, I'd once tried to help a very sick person and failed. I realize now that a part of this download was healing ability, something I can unpack and develop in time. Coincidentally, during the retreat, Dr. Joe had us all beam healing energy towards volunteers, and I saw miraculous results. I believe is connected directly to the gift Aroosha had given me. I was also shown a collective future, a dark time coming, yes, but beyond that a brighter age, humanity awakening faster than ever before, a wave of merging with the divine sweeping across our species. At first I was afraid, but then I realized that it was good. And then just as suddenly it was all over. I dropped back into meditation, which went on for hours more. When it ended, I had no idea how much time had passed. Since that day, I felt peaceful, with new insights arriving slowly. I don't yet know the full meaning of what Aroosha had shared, but I sense it unfolding. I am reporting this as faithfully as I can. I'm navigating it with a beginner's mind, and I absolutely love being here. And so that was our final story. We will leave it there and open-ended for everyone to comment on, and maybe we can revisit some of the discourse on that one when we do the next episode or when I do the next episode. And to wrap up, I am very glad that I did not pull a friend into doing this episode because I had to take a whole lot of breaks to cough, which I was hoping I wouldn't have to do. And I did end up recording for over 6 hours, needing to take breaks. And it is now 5 a.m. where I'm from, which is insane. So if you begin to hear me sort of stumbling through my words as the podcast progresses, it is because it is now 5 a.m. where I'm from. And I have officially pulled an all-nighter. And I start speaking gibberish past a certain time. So I'm impressed that I was able to read the stories up until now and get them all done, so I could edit this episode and get it out to you all. And if you enjoyed this episode, please let me know in the comments and like and subscribe. And please do give me feedback on what you enjoyed on this episode, what your preferences are going forward. If you want me to start introducing, if there is any interest in a live reading where I could interact directly with people and read the stories directly to you guys, and we can kind of get into the stories together live directly over the internet. That could also be a really cool way to help grow the community and engage with you guys. And until next time, and I am going to go walk my dogs and get to bed, hopefully before sunrise.